I'm going to talk a little bit about the first wave of Filipinos who came to the United States in the layout of different time segments. One of the waves, is being the first one, is 1587 to 1905. There are several key parts to this wave. The 1587 refers to the landing of Filipinos with the Spanish in Morro Bay due to a storm and some other events where they came ashore, and now there's a monument erected there marking the first known landing by Filipinos in the North American continent. Another piece is the St. Malo settlement in Louisiana. This settlement was started by Filipinos who frankly sort of jumped ship from the Spanish, some as early as 1763. They stayed there, they developed villages, they intermarried. And finally there was a 1904 St. Louis exposition in which Philippines was featured, and Filipinos came, and supposedly the American public was going to be educated about Philippines and Filipinos. Unfortunately, there was also sort of a presenting those who lived up in the hills as sort of representing the Philippines.
The second wave of the Filipino migration to the United States is from 1905 to 1945. We have a continuation of the government pensionados, or the government scholars, again, who were sent to the United States for education and to have gone back to the Philippines. Some did and some did not. Also, at this time frame, we have the workers that were recruited to work at the fields of Hawaii, workers that eventually ended up in the fields of California and the canneries of Alaska.
One of the earliest arrivals in Oregon was Marciano Pizarro, who turned 105 this year. He came to America in 1925 and joined the U.S. Navy in 1941. During the war, his wife and daughter were sent to a Japanese concentration camp.
Irene is the daughter, and Lola Hati is his wife. And basically they were put in a concentration camp where in North Portland, where the Expo Center is now located. And a lot of Lola Hati's relatives were interned in Eastern Oregon. So her family was basically divided. I'm not sure how she came over. All I know is that they met here in the United States, I think in Astoria. I don't know, Portland or Astoria, I'm not sure. Okay, well, the way it happened is that my father, Renato Pizarro, he came here from the Philippines in 1972. And he visited some family relatives in San Francisco. His relatives in San Francisco told him that he has an uncle here in Gresham, Lolo Marciano. And when he visited Lolo Marciano here in Gresham, Lolo Marciano encouraged him to stay. And so basically that's how it happened. Lolo Marciano is my great uncle. Yeah, my name is Jed Pizarro. I'm the son of Renato and Bella Pizarro of Gresham, Oregon. We've been here. The family's been here in the Portland metro area for almost over 30 years. My dad came here again in 1972. The rest of the family, my mom, my sister, Charisse, and I followed in 1973 during the martial law in the Philippines. And then Lolo lives in a foster care, in a wonderful foster care in Gresham, Oregon, managed by Fred Asa.
The usual career path of the Filipinos in the 20s started from dishwashing before they became busboys and other kitchen work. George Pimentel came to the U.S. in 1927 from San Fernando, La Union Province. His widow, Mary Pimentel, remembers.
He came when he was 18 years old. You know, during that time, Philippines was still a colony of the U.S., so all they needed was a passport. So they could come and go. So, and then started working here first, well, many places, he said, to have something to eat.
Okay. Was he a military soldier?
No, his brother was, but he never went.
Okay.
So then, working in families, doing housework, then finally ended up as a bartender for Mosa. He worked there for 32 years until he retired.
The long history of Filipino immigration was fraught with struggle, discrimination, loss, faith, and hope.
Discrimination. He went to a coffee shop. He did not see the sign that says we cater to whites only. So he sat down there for a long time and nobody was serving him. And then they I think he kind of asked people and they pointed at the thing. So he left. I think that was real sad.
The third wave are those Filipinos that came over to the United States from after the World War II, from 1945 to 1965. Some of those are also the war brides. After the third wave, time of President Johnson, there was a law: Filipinos can come to the U.S. if you have some occupation that is needed here in the United States. At that time, you can petition yourself, and that's how I did when I came over here in 1968. I petitioned myself as an engineer. I'm a civil engineer and sanitary engineer. Those are the time that there were a lot of Filipinos that came over here.
I met Willie in the Philippines when we were both working in the regional health office. He left. I was left behind. So I still have to have the babies in the Philippines.
Okay.
Will was born February of 1969, and I came to the U.S. in June 1969.
Like, you know, my sister used to deliver vegetable. He will sell or trade, you know, vegetable with either canned goods, something like that. So I met Frank there.
How did the romance blossom?
Oh, okay. He asked me, he asked me that where do I live? Oh, you know, it's far, I said, because I don't know. And so, actually, you know, how I came here, sent me a form, something. He's sending me over here.
My first assignment was Whidbey Island, Oak Harbor, Washington.
Since the last symposium,
You retired?
a lot of things happened since the symposium. Of course, during summer, I'm active here at the Grotto. I'm the lead usher during noon mass. Early Tuesday morning from 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock, I'm with the Veterans Committee of the Gateway Oaks, where we recycle cardboard and bottles to raise funds for the veterans at the VA hospital. And then from there, I go to Lobes and Fishes at Southeast 106th, pick up my Meals on Wheels deliveries. And I try to deliver that by noon time, in which time I go to my Kiwanis meeting at Chinese Village. And then in the afternoon, a few hours rest, and in the evening, I go to a dance class. at Paradise Ballroom.
It was on August 10 that we started the Filipino-American National Historical Society, Oregon Chapter. The Oregon Chapter is the very first chapter of the national organization. And this is the logo that I designed for the chapter. And we have here Mr. Flores, Alex Flores. We have the big band here, and this guy here is still alive, and he owned a big band style group. We have here Mr. Soy, and then we have Mr. Pimentel, and this is another interesting photograph because it shows how Filipinos during those years in 1936 celebrate a party. And you would never think that they're houseboy, busboys, because they really dressed up. And also during those years, they have dates, white women. Christmas celebration was a big deal for Filipinos during those years. They always have Christmas parties. And also, St. Vincent Hospital in 1948, they have a lot of Filipinos there. We also have, in the collection of photographs, we also have tapes, videotapes, and sound tapes like this. The Filipinos in the area, they were reluctant to show us or talk to us, but once we have explained to them the reason why we wanted to know more about their life, then they would be willing to let us go into the come inside the home and show us all the photographs that they have. Okay. I had been practicing as an optometrist in Manila, right in Quiapo district. Then I decided to immigrate. It took me 5 years before I got my interview at the U.S. Embassy. And there were so many problems that arises after that because that was the time when Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law. That was 72. This friend of mine that I met in Manila who asked me if I would like to pass by Portland, and I stayed with them for 1 week. As soon as we arrived in their house, they asked me, "Ferdy, do you want to come with us? We are going to attend a birthday party." There was a basement. I've never seen a basement before. But we went in, and there was dark inside, and there were some young people talking, and they introduced me. Adela was one of the young people. I like party. I really enjoyed party. I grew up in the city, so I like those things. So every time Adela and her friends invite me, I always go with them.
My name is Anselmo Villanueva. I'm currently the chairperson of the Philippine American Association of Eugene, Springfield, and vicinity in Lane County. It's my pleasure to be on this video to talk about the fourth wave. The fourth wave of Filipinos and Filipino Americans is typically described as from 1965 to present time. And 1965 is a key, like a landmark point in time, because the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 was passed at the federal level, which opened the gates to allow more Filipinos, I believe it was about 20,000 a year, to come into this country with basically relaxed guidelines. There were definitely guidelines, but not as strict as in previous years. And so there was literally a flood of people coming this way, and part of that is also known as the brain drain, because a lot of Filipinos who came during that time were the professionals, college-educated, nurses, doctors, attorneys, CPAs, and so on. And at the same time, in the Philippines, there were bad economic times, and so people looked at this as an opportunity to come to the United States and start basically a new life. Part of the history of the Filipino-American experience actually is not just from the fourth wave, but from the beginnings of when Filipinos began to leave the Philippines, was this intermarrying of people outside of the Filipino ethnic group. So I'm sure, much like people know, the Spaniards were in the Philippines, the Chinese, the Japanese, all kinds of other groups. And so really the intermarrying started during that particular time. Fast forward to the 20th century, I was born in the late 1940s. My father came here to the United States in the late 20s. At that time, mostly Filipino men came to the United States. There were very few Filipino women. And so my father actually ended up marrying someone who was not Filipino, my mother, who was German and English from the state of Montana. And my brother and I were born in the 40s. And so I started noticing that with all of the Filipinos, the Manongs that I grew up with, the majority of them, and this is in Santa Barbara, California, were married to people who were not Filipinos. Then what happened, the phenomenon that as they got older and then immigration was a little bit more liberal, so these old-time Filipino males who were single at the time began to bring over Filipino wives, and so that was yet another experience. When I moved here to Oregon, and I just noticed that there were very, very few couples in Eugene where both the husband and wife were both Filipino. But I would say it's safe to say that the majority of families in the Eugene-Springfield area are of mixed background, where one parent is Filipino or one partner is Filipino or spouse and the other is not. And so the offspring, the sons and daughters of those unions, there's a huge population of kids who are mixed. Today, September 27th, I'm here in North Bend, Oregon, and I'm noticing the same phenomenon here, where I actually observe very few Filipino men, but I see lots of Filipino women. If you look around, I see a lot of children who are obviously mixed.
I was supposed to go to Yale University, but I found out that most of the teachers that I was looking for had left Yale and had gone to the Midwest. So I followed them to the Midwest, and I ended up in Waco, Texas, at Baylor University, where I met my husband, Bruce. And it was fate, I guess, because we got married, and I went back to teach at the UP, University of the Philippines, and then I came back here, and then we both taught at Baylor University, and then Bruce got relocated to Oregon. So we came to Oregon in 1968, and we've been here since, and I started my community activism, starting with the PTA, with my children, and then after the PTA, then I did something for the city, I did something for the county, and then I ended up doing something for the state. That was when I was in the Commission of Asian Affairs. And from there, then PACO was developed, and from PACO was CFAA. So that is the end, that is the journey, the odyssey of this person.
Okay, thank you.
After I got my medical degree, I went to the United States as an intern in Ellis Hospital in Schenectady, New York. And then I had my residency in dermatology at the University of Chicago. That is from 1964 to 67. And then I stayed there and was an instructor at the University of Chicago until we had to leave to satisfy the requirements of the exchange visitors program. And so we left for the Philippines, and I was in practice in the Philippines from 69 to 73. In 1973, we came back to the United States, and I was in private practice in Norwich, Connecticut for a year. But I did not like the business aspect of medical practice, so I joined Kaiser Permanente Northwest in 1974, and I was there as a staff dermatologist until I retired in 2005. And so that's 31 years with Kaiser.
Well, I was a student at Seattle University, and Fred Cordova is director of public relations there. There was a time when Manang Dorothy Cordova came here to have an oral interview of some Filipino women because Manang Dorothy was a director of demonstration project of Asian Americans. Also, they were invited to speak at the Phil-Am building through the help of Marcelina Pimentel, who was a then president. So we decided to invite the Cordovas to speak about the objectives of FANHS. And then the next year they came again, and we decided that we should be forming a group. So sometime in August, we have a meeting in the house, and I designated Fernando Sacdalan as our president. I designated myself as vice president. I was born in Naguilian, La Union. I came here on a student visa on October 3, 1963. I studied at Seattle University. Okay, let me tell you one interesting part of my student visa experience. I was in the Philippines till on September 30, and I was supposed to be in Seattle September 15. And knowing the power of politics, I decided to write President John F. Kennedy. I wrote an aerogram. Guess what? After 3 days, I was called, and the next day, I was flying to United States of America. And that is the power of politics. And so, since John F. Kennedy is a Democrat, I decided to be a Democrat, and I've been Democrat ever since.
February 28, 1984, leap year noon. Leap year.
Okay.
So, ang mga probinsyano, we migrated here. There was quite a turmoil in the Philippines, but then I still wanted to stay there. But my father was so insistent for us to come over here because of the ominous things that might happen. So they sent us the plane tickets. Our papers were already prepared. Actually, my parents came over here first because my dad was he was a federal employee at Clark Air Force Base, civilian section. So he was granted a special immigrant visa to come over here.
And when was that?
And that was, they left in 1972. That was before martial law. Okay. As a matter of fact, the airport in Manila then was burnt down to the ground. A few days after that, martial law was declared.
Okay.
So
who
I was
went
the
with
only
them?
one. My dad, my mom, Renee, Dan, Nanette, May.
Everybody.
Everybody except me, because I was married. And my daughter was still young then. So that's it. And then that started Ninoy being assassinated, Cory took over. I was talking about I was humbled because probably it's because of the excitement of migrating to America. As I've said, my three-piece suit had something to do with my beliefs. So I was trying to welcome a new life. And I knew that we will be landing, we will be going to America in the spring. I said, well, this is a new life. I better do something. So I had that moss green three-piece suit with a hat like Al Capone and everything. But then I said, when I came here, when we touched down, boy, my happiness. I touched ground, I almost kissed the ground, except that somebody almost kicked me.
Considering our long immigration history, the Filipino community is now populated with people born on either side of the Pacific. children of the waves of immigrants are now active members of society. They are the faces of the Filipino-American experience today.
Downstairs. Now everyone's all watching me and he's recording. Okay. Guy, a mix of black and white. Not so dark and yet not so bright. Just that perfect shade of light. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? $10. There's many more performers than I am. I'm Jay Specht, son of Michael Specht and Maria Soledad de los Santos Pangan Specht. So she's the Filipina.
Oh, I'm Michaela/Micah Specht, and I'm Jay's sister, so we have the same parents.
Okay, were you the same, born there too?
I was born in '87, so Jay and I are only about 16 months apart. We're barely, I'm barely a year older than him. I was born in Santa Monica, because at the time that's where my parents were living. But both Jay and I, our first few months after we were born, we kind of got transported back and forth to the Philippines, to California. It was almost like every time we came back to see our parents, we were in a new house. Until we moved here. Once we moved to Oregon, we would spend about 6 months out of the year in the Philippines, and then 6 months here, going to school here. If you look at our old ones, yeah, I look exactly like my mom. Everybody says that growing up, I look exactly like my mom.
Oh, why don't you join them? Sit with them so that we can have some
yeah, so they can see the similarities.
Yeah, so they can compare. This is how we look, maybe.
Oh, let's go more.
They were talking about your love life.
Yeah. They asked Jay and I how you and Dad met, and what did you say? Well, Jay's talk to Micah.
I said that Dad got a magazine in the mail one day. And he opened it up.
Don't you ever!
To page 72. And he was like, that's it right there. What number is this? Okay. B36X. So, and then 2 weeks later,
yeah, you were
in
here.
a Balagbayan box.
And
they're like, that's our mom.
As you can see, my children have our sense of humor.
Yeah.
Okay,
Say something in Bisaya.
Unsay imong ngalan?
Alexis.
Pila imong edad?
7.
Kinsay ngalan sa imong inahan?
Steve Dakshevsky.
Inahan. Or inahan or mother. Inahan means mother.
Lourdes Dakshevsky.
O niya, unsay imong pamahaw? Luto. Pamahaw. Biko.
Biko.
What's Biko?
I don't know.
Unsay Biko? Sala may gikaon nimo.
Sticky rice.
What was that again?
Sticky rice.
Ah, okay.
You know,
introduce that first, that baby. Who is that?
Who is the baby? What is the name of your baby? Tiara. Tiara Isabella. She wants to drink. I know. She's like, give me that thing. Here. You want to be on camera? See? You're gonna be a star.
On camera already.
You're a star. Sabi niya, hindi. Gusto ko sandigin. Whoops! Asa na pulutan? Bad influence eh.
Okay, so I'm Amy Santos Lyons, and I immigrated to Portland in 2000. Back home in the Philippines, I was a community organizer working with urban poor communities, working for their land rights, working for rights of the women, for early child care and support systems for the children. And while I was there, I met Peace Corps volunteers. and who eventually became the father of my son. And it was around the birth of my son that I eventually decided to move to Portland to be with him, to form a family. And, you know, in the beginning, whenever you marry for love, you always hope to have the fairy tale ending and for it to go on and happily ever after. But it was quickly clear to me in the first year that I came that I was not going to have that fairy tale ending. So my marriage quickly unraveled. I had experienced some domestic violence, and while I was going through that experience, I went.
It's mine.
Woo! What is that? Is that all your candy? Ooh,
Gabriel, hang on a second, okay? Because I'm gonna go tell a story. Can you go with Mika first?
Eat this.
Okay.
It's all part.
All right. Can you excuse us?
Yeah.
And this is your first son, right?
And this is my first son. This is
what's his
my
name?
Gabriel, who's 8 years old.
Okay.
It's all mine. Give it to me.
So
No,
during this experience, I had to quickly learn how to navigate the U.S. systems. The U.S. systems of divorce, of custody, of gaining residency. So that's how I survived, and that's how I endured. And in being able to come to the other side of that experience, I met wonderful Filipinos. I met a community. I gained another family. I realized that really Filipinos are there for each other, and that you know, in many ways, walang iwanan. We recognize, we can smell the bagoong from each other, and we step in to take care of each other. So 8 years later, I am not yet a citizen, but I do consider myself an active resident of Portland. I love my adopted city. I love the people that I've met there. I've married again with another Oregonian, and I've begun to do community organizing again. So, in many ways, finding home.
All right. That all, right? Okay.
Ako, ayan. Hiningi mo yung kwento mo, tuloy.